6:32 this Thursday, President Joe Biden addressing the nation for the first time following his decision to bow out of the race for the White House. 13 Wham's Stephanie Joseph is at the live desk this morning with more on the president's announcement and what he had to say from the Oval Office. Steph?
Yeah, Dan, you're taking a live look over at the White House this morning. That's where last night President Biden was surrounded by family as he delivered his remarks to the nation. Biden reflected on his 50 years of public service and record as president, adding he loves the country. He also addressed his decision to drop out of this year's presidential race, saying it was time for a younger group to step up. That, he said, would be the best way to unite the nation and Democrats.
But nothing can come in the way of saving our democracy. That includes personal ambition. So I've decided the best way forward is to pass the torch to a new generation. That's the best way to unite our nation.
Right now, the president said he'll be focused on doing his job over the next 6 months of his term.
So the question is, what are the takeaways from last night's address? We have asked political science professor Tim Kneeland from Nazareth University to weigh in. Tim joining us now by Zoom.
Thank you so much for joining us. I would say, what was your takeaway from the address? I mean, the first time that we're hearing from him since a lot has happened, dropping out of the race, him going through COVID-19, and then also questions about whether he can continue leading.
Right. And what's interesting is that speech really didn't address much of that. He did give some allusion to the fact that he was passing the torch, but he didn't explain to the American people why just a week ago or so, he was saying that he was in it to win it. You were riding with Biden and that we were going to finish the job. So even though the speech was about that to some extent, really it was about his legacy and also to try to remind people he's not a lame duck president. He's still got 6 months left, and he's got things that he would like to accomplish in that 6 months.
Do we think that the message resonated with the American public last night? Yesterday, during a news conference at the White House, Karine Jean-Pierre, kind of, I don't want to say skirted a lot of these questions, but asked the media to wait until after the president spoke because she said that a lot of the questions they were asking would be addressed. But as you mentioned, and as Americans saw last night, a lot of the questions were not answered last night. Not a lot was answered. There was a lot of backing the current VP and touting the past 3 years of his administration. But as you mentioned, he doesn't talk about what drove to that decision, what led that decision to drop out.
Exactly. And it was surprising in that many of us thought that he would address that to some level. But again, part of the problem is then he would have to acknowledge something I don't think he's ready to speak about, which is perhaps his own health issues or his the sense that he's now too old. He said he chose to pass the torch. He wants us to fix in his mind that this is the greatest sacrifice he's made, that it caps a 50-year career of serving the American public. And what it's best for America is to save democracy, which is what this election is about. That's really the text that he's drawing on. And so in many ways, it really is classic Joe Biden, who does tend to want to make sure that you see him in the pantheon of great Americans. I mean, he cited Washington and Lincoln and Jefferson, and of course, he's sitting in the Oval Office. So he wants people to know that that one term that he had was one of the most significant in American history.
For sure. I mean, you kind of spoke to it before. And what I found really striking about what he said is that his decision would not be motivated by personal ambition, that big takeaway there. But another thing, wanting to unite the party. Do you think that, putting Kamala Harris as the front runner for this ticket, that'll be able to do that? We're kind of already seeing some movement, but what do you make of that?
Yeah, no, I think in terms of being ready to take up the torch that he's passing. He's from the silent generation. He's passing it to the baby boom generation. That she immediately, I mean, they're touting, as the Democratic Party, they're touting the $100 million that she raised right away. They're touting the fact that she clinched all the delegates up at least promises to vote for her. They're touting the enthusiasm that she's getting, 40,000 new voters. So for them, this is definitely a win, and it feels like the party is united. If there's any cracks that appear on the facade, we're not going to see those for a few weeks. Right now, it's a honeymoon period for the Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris. And so the Democrats are very enthusiastic.
Tim, we've got about 30 seconds. Democrats are very enthusiastic. How are Republicans feeling this morning? How is Donald Trump feeling this morning after watching President Biden address the nation last night?
He is rueful that Biden is not his opponent. Absolutely. I think he feels like the rug was pulled out under him. He thought he was going to sail into victory. He's not. This is going to be a really interesting race going ahead. Probably a little nasty.
All right. Tim Kneeland from Nazareth University, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.